Thank you, Sam, and I want to welcome everybody to today's presentation and applaud the fact that you're here. This is SCRA, Service Member Civil Relief Act, is really turning into an issue that I think is more of a sleeper issue than it had been in the past, but it now has more expectations than ever before. At one point in time, we're going to talk a little briefly about the history, but when it was the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act, the SSCRA, 6% was the big thing, and you didn't have as many protections, and we didn't have as much guidance as we do now, and the 6% was the big issue. And we had gone through such a long period where this rule was virtually unused. And then came Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and we have been in the Middle East for the last 20 years, actually. And as a result of that, more people are attuned to SCRA. And I'll probably say this a couple times today, that this is now essentially, we went from the spirit and the intent of what the SSCRA was into a, this is my benefit and this is my right. And my own personal opinion has to come through on some of this when I say I don't like that the government says, okay, financial institution, you have to give up. The spirit and the intent had its place, and a lot of that's out of the way. We're going to talk about it in a few minutes. A lot of those issues are no longer there, and now this is an expectation that these things are going to be done because it is a benefit and a right. And it doesn't matter that the person, doesn't matter what they're doing in the service, where they're doing it, or in some cases how they're trying to abuse the rights that they have. But the SCRA has become a benefit of a service member, a right that they expect, and that the public and Congress expects financial institutions to do. And it's like, why should we give up the things that we have, in some cases when it's being abused? There's the patriotic side of me that says, yeah, we're gung-ho. We want to support. In the other hand, but why does it have to come directly out of our pocket this way when others don't suffer from that kind of thing? So there's pros and there's cons, but essentially the service member, in my mind, has become a protected class. Because they have these benefits and these rights, and because the SCRA has expanded. And we're going to look today at one of the areas where that expansion has gone above and beyond what the law requires. And I fear that that will become an industry practice. This is the Sallie Mae case we're going to be talking about later this afternoon, where they have said we will do more than is required. I think there were extraneous reasons why they committed to what they did, why Sallie Mae did what they did, and as a result, we may now have more expectations placed upon us. One case in point, as an example, would be many banks would say, we're going to lower all of our interest rates down below the 6% for our service members just because we can, and we think that they should never have a loan, whether it's pre-service or post-service, that's over 6%. Rah, 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 we want to support our troops. I was working at Fort Hood National Bank at the time. 98% of my customers were in that realm. I could not have survived if all of our interest rates were at 6%. It simply would not have worked. So there's pros and there's cons. Get back onto the agenda because we got a lot of materials to cover today. I want to first say, please don't send a comment that says it looks like our slides aren't pushing. You've got about 22 slides and we've got about 92 pages of materials. What that tells you is that today is materials driven. Hopefully you've got a printout of the materials packet in front of you. That's a big packet because I had a choice. I could talk about just SCRA, or I could throw in additional things. We're briefly going to cover some of these topics, some of the parts of the SCRA, and we're briefly going to mention an overview of the Military Lending Act. But I had that information, and my choice was put it in there and give you a good resource material that you can search, do keyword searches on your computer, or print this out, put it into a book on your bookshelf. Or I could eliminate that data. so that we would simply get down to the nuts and bolts that we were going to discuss today. I decided I would rather give you the resource material. Now, we're not going to cover everything that's in the materials, but you're going to have it available to you to use as a resource. So, that said, on the agenda, as you look at the materials, I don't have it on here because it doesn't relate to a particular page in the materials. As you look at the slides on the screen or in your printouts in the upper right-hand corner, generally I've got page numbers, and that it means that that slide is simply a page holder for that particular segment in the materials. So that's what we're going to wind up going through. And so, again, it's going to be a little faster pace through the materials. The slides are there for reference, so you may have a slide that sits on the screen for a longer period of time. Now, what we're going to go ahead and talk about today, again, an overview of the SCRA, essentially where it's coming from, so that you understand where its roots are. And what guidance we do and don't have. And then we've got some protections under the SCRA and the Military Lending Act. Those are two different issues. We're going to talk about those so that you understand that it doesn't just start and stop with the SCRA. When we talk about policies and procedures and things that you need to do, it only makes good sense to incorporate both those issues. When we talk about procedures and notices, some things that you do have to do and when. We're going to talk a little bit about some case reviews. Here again, I've given you a lot more information than we're going to go over, but when you sit down at your institution and say, guys, we need to do a little bit more under SCRA, somebody in management may likely say, well, why? Why do we have to do that? Well, here's a case where this happened. Here's a case where that happened. The bank got beat about the head and shoulders, either in court or by the regulators or both, and we want to avoid that. And based on these cases, there are lessons that we can learn from these. Talk a little bit about non-discrimination, simply because it's a section that's there, and I don't want any lenders to say, oh, you're a service member, I can't make you a loan. It doesn't work that way. It's just like consumer protection benefits. If somebody sued you over a Reg B or Fair Credit issue, Consumer Protection Act type issue, and then came back into the bank for a loan, you can't deny them because they sued you in the past. That would be a further violation of their rights. We're going to talk about some lessons learned, a couple of auditing tips, some things that banks need to pay attention to, some other laws, and there are proposals out there, and we're going to talk briefly, very briefly, about the proposals. Again, that is ammunition so that when you go to senior management, when you go to your board and say, here's what we want to do, when they say, well, does it really require that we do that? When you'll have the ammunition that goes in and says, well, based on the cases, based on the current SCRA, based on the best practices of the industry, and based on these proposals that are in Congress, it makes good sense to do this now. And there may be some wiggle room when you say, well, that's a bill, that's not a law. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. You don't have to follow those, but it's nice to know that those things are on the horizon. Then we're going to talk a little bit about complaints. The intent here is that we're going to lay the foundation between the SCRA, especially the SCRA, a little bit of Military Lending Act, before we get into complaints and legal cases, so that you'll understand, well, this is why they had to do it that way. This is why this particular requirement exists. So those will be some of the issues that we'll want to talk about. A real quick overview, and you can see that you're on page 2 in your materials. The law and the regulation, essentially the Service Member Civil Relief Act. You've got the citation under your resources. It's linked. We have the entire act under the alphabet soup on Bankers Online. But there is no implementing regulation. You've got the law. So you don't have the guidance of an official staff commentary. You don't have all that good information that comes in with interpretations. Essentially, you've got a raw law that you have to be able to look at, interpret yourself, be consistent with it, and move forward. You also want to network with peers, and through conferences, webinars like this, hopefully you'll be able to see, okay, now I have a better understanding